The great meeting hall of the Galactic Council was full of noise. 7 different alien species sat in their special seats, all talking at once. The room was huge, with walls that went up so high you could barely see the top. Strange lights floated in the air, making everything glow with a soft blue color. Ambassador John Carter walked slowly to the center of the room. His black shoes made small clicking sounds on the smooth floor. He was 52 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. For 6 months he had been trying to make peace with the alien races. But today felt different. Today felt like the end of something. Behind him, Captain Lisa Brooks stood very straight in her blue military uniform. She had short brown hair and worried eyes. She knew what the ambassador was about to say, and it scared her. The weight of Earth's biggest secret pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy rock. The Zalani creatures were the loudest ones in the room. They looked like giant bugs with 4 arms and big heads. Their leader was High Counselor Vexithera. She had been pushing human space colonies for months, testing how far she could go before humans would fight back. Carter reached the speaking platform in the middle of the room. He put his hands on the smooth metal surface and looked around at all the alien faces staring at him. Some looked curious, others looked bored. The Zalani looked angry as always. "Honored council members," Carter began. His voice was calm, but everyone could hear the stress underneath. "Earth formally asks that the Zalani stop their attacks on human colonies. We have been very patient, but our patience is running out." The room became quiet for just a moment. Then Vexithara made a sound like metal scraping against stone. It was how her species laughed. "The humans talk about running out of patience?" She clicked her sharp teeth together. "Your people have only been in space for 200 years. You are babies compared to us. What could you possibly do to threaten the mighty Zalani Empire?" Other aliens in the room started making their own laughing sounds. The Karathi delegates, who looked like tall gray birds, ruffled their feathers. The Mexian representatives, with their blue skin and 6 eyes, blinked rapidly in what passed for amusement among their kind. Carter felt his jaw tighten. He had hoped it would not come to this. Earth had spent 2 centuries trying to be good neighbors in the galaxy. They had shared their music and art. They had traded fairly. They had helped other species when disasters struck their worlds. But some species saw kindness as weakness. "We have been holding back," Carter said quietly. The room suddenly went completely silent. Even the floating lights seemed to dim a little. Carter continued, "Earth's military has followed a doctrine of restraint for our entire time in space. We hoped we would never have to show you what we are really capable of. This is your formal warning." Captain Brooks shifted her weight from one foot to the other. She remembered the classified briefings she had attended. She knew about the hidden shipyards near Jupiter. She knew about the weapons that had never been tested in combat. She knew about the industrial capacity that Earth had kept secret from the galaxy for 200 years. The Zalani delegation erupted in more scraping laughter sounds. Vexithara stood up on her 4 legs, towering over the other delegates. "Warning," she screeched, "from the species that runs away from every conflict, from the race that apologizes when we take their mining rights. Humans are weak. Your warning means nothing." But not all the aliens were laughing. Ambassador Keth of the Altarian Republic sat forward in his chair. The Altarians looked almost human, except for their pale yellow skin and completely black eyes. They were a peaceful species who had been trading with Earth for 50 years. "Ambassador Carter," Keth said carefully, "what exactly do you mean by holding back?" Carter looked directly at the Altarian. Of all the species in the Council, only the Altarians had ever shown real friendship to humanity. "I mean that everything you have seen of human military capability represents a tiny fraction of what we can do," Carter said. "We built our society around the idea that strength should be hidden until absolutely necessary. We hoped that day would never come." General Pete Hamilton watched from the observation deck high above the main floor. He was 60 years old, with short white hair and scars on his hands from his younger days as a soldier. Next to him stood Colonel Amy Watson, a small woman with sharp green eyes who never missed any detail. "Are you recording this?" Hamilton asked quietly. "Every word, sir," Watson replied. When this goes bad, we'll need proof that we tried to warn them. Hamilton nodded. He had spent his whole career preparing for this moment. The secret military facilities on Mars and in the asteroid belt, the hidden weapon systems that could crack planets in half, the ship designs that made current galactic technology look like stone tools. For 2 centuries, humanity had kept these secrets locked away. They had let other species think humans were weak and peaceful. It had been the greatest deception in galactic history. On the main floor, the debate was getting louder. The Karathi delegate, Ambassador Sektar, spread his wing-like arms. Even if the humans have more weapons than they show, he squawked, they are still 1 species against 7. The mathematics are simple. Carter almost smiled at that. The mathematics were indeed simple, but not in the way Sektar thought. High Counselor Meldona of the Rigel Confederacy spoke next. Her species looked like large cats that walked on 2 legs with golden fur and bright orange eyes. The Council has been generous with humanity, she purred. We allowed you to join our civilization. We shared our technology. We gave you trading, rights. And this is how you repay us, with threats? Carter closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about his daughter back on Earth playing in the gardens outside New Geneva. He thought about the millions of human children who had never known war, who had grown up in a galaxy where their parents handled problems with words instead of weapons. We are not threatening anyone, Carter said. We are trying to prevent a war that nobody wants. The Zilani have been testing our colonies for months. They destroyed a mining station on Kepler 4522c last week, claiming it was in their territory. It was not. They killed 47 human miners who had families waiting for them to come home. Vexthara made another scraping sound. 47 humans. So few, yet you make such noise about it. Perhaps if your species was stronger, they would still be alive. That was the moment Carter knew diplomacy was dead. The Council voted 30 minutes later. 5 species sided with the Zilani. Only the Altarians voted to support the human position. The Karathi abstained, not wanting to choose sides. The final resolution censured Earth for inflammatory rhetoric and inappropriate threats against Council members. It demanded that humanity pay reparations to the Zilani for the diplomatic insult of claiming to be stronger than them. Carter packed his briefcase with steady hands. Captain Brooks helped him gather the papers and data tablets scattered across their table. What happens now, sir? Brooks asked quietly. Carter looked around the great hall one last time. The aliens were already moving on to other business, treating the human warning as a joke they had already forgotten. Now we go home, Carter said, and we let them find out what holding back really meant. General Hamilton and Colonel Watson watched as the human delegation left the chamber. The general's communicator buzzed softly. Sir, Watson said. Message from Earth Command. They're asking for your assessment. Hamilton looked down at the aliens, below still laughing and talking as if nothing important had happened. Tell them the warning has been delivered and rejected, Hamilton said. Tell them to begin Phase 1 preparations. And Colonel? Yes, sir. Tell them that humanity tried. 3 weeks after the council meeting, the morning shift was just starting on Kepler 442b. The mining colony sat in a valley between 2 small mountains. The red sun was rising slowly, painting the rocky ground in warm colors. It should have been a peaceful morning. Mining supervisor Greg Thompson sat in his office drinking coffee and looking at production reports on his computer screen. He was a big man with thick arms from years of working with heavy machinery. His wife Kate was making breakfast in their small house on the other side of the colony. Their 2 kids were getting ready for school. The first explosion came without warning. Greg's coffee cup shattered against the wall as the building shook. His computer screen went black. Outside his window, he saw a ball of fire rising from the main processing plant. What the hell? Greg jumped up from his chair and ran to the communication panel on the wall. He pressed the emergency button. This is Thompson to all personnel. We have an explosion at Plant 7. Emergency teams respond immediately. But before anyone could answer, the second explosion hit. This one was much bigger. The administrative building next to Greg's office simply disappeared in a flash of white light. The blast wave threw Greg across the room and into the far wall. His ears were ringing, but he could hear the screaming now. People were running outside, covered in dust and blood. Greg pulled himself up and looked out the broken window. Ships. Alien ships filled the sky above the colony. They were long and dark, with weapons that glowed red underneath their hulls. Greg had seen pictures of Zilani warships in the defense briefings, but seeing them in person was different. They looked like giant metal insects, ready to sting. "Get everyone to the emergency shelters," Greg shouted into his communicator, his voice cracked from the dust in his throat. "This is not a drill. All civilians to emergency shelters now." The colony's defense systems were pathetic compared to what was attacking them. 2 old patrol ships and 6 ground-based plasma cannons. They had been built to deal with pirates and smugglers, not a full military assault. Lieutenant Commander Julie Adams was in the pilot seat of the patrol ship Defiant when the attack began. She was 28 years old, with red hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She had been doing a routine patrol around the outer edge of the system when her sensors started screaming warnings. "Control, this is Adams." She spoke quickly into her radio. "I'm reading multiple bogies coming in fast. Really fast." "Copy that, Defiant. Can you identify them?" Julie's hands flew over her controls, trying to get a clear reading. When the computer finally gave her an answer, her blood went cold. "Control, these are Zilani warships. I count 37 ships. Repeat, 37 enemy vessels. They're targeting the colony." The response took too long to come. Julie could see plasma fire raining down on the colony below. Buildings were turning into melted metal and glass. "Defiant, this is Colony Control. We need you to buy us time for evacuation. Nearest fleet assets are 6 hours away." 6 hours. Julie looked at her scanners again. 37 Zilani destroyers against her 1 small patrol ship. The other patrol ship, Guardian, was already a ball of burning metal falling toward the planet's surface. "Understood, Control. Beginning attack run." Julie knew she was going to die, but maybe she could save some of the people below. She pushed her engines to maximum power and dove straight into the enemy formation. The Defiant was fast and small, which made it hard to hit. She managed to get close enough to one of the destroyers to fire her missiles. The Zilani ship's shields flashed blue as the missiles hit. Julie's attack barely scratched the paint, but it got their attention. Suddenly, 20 Zilani fighters were chasing her through the asteroid field near the planet. "Come on, you ugly bugs," Julie muttered through gritted teeth. "Let's dance." She led the fighters away from the colony, twisting and turning between the floating rocks. Her ship's hull groaned under the stress, but she kept pushing. Every second she kept them busy was another second for civilians to reach safety, but there were too many of them. Julie's ship shook as enemy fire hit her engines. Warning lights flashed red all over her control panel. "This is Adams to Colony. Control," she said, her voice calm even though she knew these would be her last words. "Tell Earth what they did here." The Defiant exploded in a ball of white fire. The blast was so bright it could be seen from the colony below. Down on the surface, Greg Thompson held his daughter Emma in his arms as they crouched in the emergency bunker. The little girl was crying, scared by the loud noises outside. His wife Kate held their son Bobby, who was only 5 years old. "It's going to be okay," Greg whispered to Emma, even though he knew it was a lie. "The ships will come. Earth will send ships to help us." But the ships that came were more Zilani vessels. By the time the bombardment stopped, most of the colony was gone. The processing plants were melted craters. The residential area was burning rubble. The school where the children should have been learning about art and science was nothing but twisted metal. Greg's family was among the lucky ones. Their bunker held, but 2,047 other colonists were not so fortunate. Families that had come to Kepler 442b for a new life. Children who would never grow up. Elderly couples who had wanted to spend their final years watching the beautiful red sunsets. The rescue ships arrived 6 hours later, just like Colony Control had promised. But there was not much left to rescue. On Earth, President Karen Mitchell stood in the Situation Room deep underneath the White House. The room was full of screens showing information from all over human space. Military officers in dark uniforms sat at computers, their faces lit by the glow of their monitors. General Pete Hamilton placed a data tablet on the table in front of the president. The casualty numbers were right there in black letters on the white screen. 2,847 confirmed dead, Hamilton said quietly. Mostly civilians, families. President Mitchell picked up the tablet and read the names. So many names. She had been president for 3 years, but she had never had to make a decision like this. They killed our people after we warned them, she said. Her voice was colder than space itself. We told them we were holding back, and they thought that made us weak. General Hamilton nodded. He had been waiting for this moment his entire career. Do we take the gloves off, Madam President? Mitchell set the tablet down carefully. She looked around the room at all the military advisors and intelligence officers watching her. These were the people who knew Earth's real secrets. They knew about the hidden weapons. They knew about the ships that had never been revealed to the galaxy. They knew about the industrial power that humanity had kept locked away for 2 centuries. There are no more gloves, President Mitchell said. Activate all war protocols, every single one. The people in the room started moving immediately. Orders went out through quantum communication channels to every human world and station. Computer systems that had been sleeping for decades began waking up. On Mars, the secret military factories started their production lines. In the asteroid belt, mining operations began converting raw materials into weapon components. Near Jupiter, the hidden shipyards that had been built in the shadows of the gas giants' moons received their activation codes. Admiral Chris Morgan was on the command ship Retribution when the orders came through. He was a tall man with gray eyes that had seen too many battles. He had been waiting in the outer system with a small fleet, pretending to be on a training mission. Sir, his communications officer called out, we're receiving war protocol authorization, all codes confirmed. Morgan looked out the window at Jupiter's swirling clouds. Hidden behind those clouds were the largest military shipyards in human history. For 200 years, they had been building ships and weapons in secret. The galaxy thought humans were peaceful traders and explorers. They were about to learn the truth. Signal all ships, Morgan ordered. Begin Phase 1 deployment, and send a message to Mars Command. What should the message say, sir? Morgan's smile was not friendly at all. Tell them the galaxy wanted to see what humans could do when we stop holding back. Now they're going to find out. Across the solar system, facilities that had existed only in the deepest classified files began revealing themselves. The Zilani had wanted a war. They had killed human families to get Earth's attention. Now they had it, and they were going to discover that humanity's greatest weapon had never been their technology or their ships. It had been their patience, their willingness to try talking instead of fighting. That patience was gone now, used up, spent on creatures who mistook mercy for weakness. The galaxy was about to meet the real human race. The species that had survived, ice ages and asteroid impacts. The people who had crawled out of caves and built rockets to the stars. The Zilani had poked a sleeping giant. Now that giant was waking up, and it was very, very angry. Admiral Chris Morgan stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution and watched something that should have been impossible. Outside the huge windows, ships were appearing from behind Jupiter's moons. Not just a few ships, hundreds of them. For 2 centuries, humanity had been building these vessels in secret. The galaxy thought humans had maybe 50 warships total. They were wrong by a factor of 20. Fleet status report, Morgan ordered. He was a man who never showed emotion, but today even he felt amazed by what he was seeing. Captain Beth Parker stood at the tactical station, her fingers dancing over the control screens. She was reading numbers that made her shake her head in disbelief. 1,200 vessels operational and ready for combat, sir, she reported. The Devastator-class battleships are coming online every 6 hours. Engineering reports the shipyards are running at 340% of normal capacity. Morgan nodded slowly. The secret was finally out. While other alien species had spent their time exploring pretty planets and setting up trade routes, humanity had quietly become the most dangerous military force in the galaxy. Every human colony, Ship had been designed with hidden weapon systems. Every mining operation included factories that could build military equipment. Every peaceful research station could transform into a fortress within hours. The aliens had thought humans were weak because human ships looked simple and clean. They had no idea that the simple design hid the most advanced technology known: space. On Mars, Dr. Kevin Ross stood in the control room of Project Prometheus. He was a small man with thick glasses, but his mind had created weapons that could destroy entire solar systems. Around him, technicians worked at computer stations, preparing systems that had never been tested in actual combat. "Begin charging sequence," Dr. Ross ordered. His voice was calm, but his hands shook slightly as he entered the activation codes. Primary target is the Zilani home system. Secondary targets are their major military bases. The weapon that Dr. Ross had spent 15 years developing was based on human understanding of stellar physics. While other species had focused on building bigger guns, humans had learned how to make stars themselves into weapons. "Charging complete in 90 minutes, sir," one of the technicians reported. "Shall we proceed with the test firing?" "No test," Dr. Ross said quietly. "The Zilani wanted to see what humans could do. Let's show them." Meanwhile, the Zilani Empire was preparing what they thought would be an easy victory. Fleet Commander Zekthul commanded the largest military force his species had ever assembled. 412 warships, including their newest and most powerful vessels. Zekthul was confident. The humans had maybe a dozen ships in the area. Even if they had more hidden somewhere, how many could there be? 50? 100? His fleet could handle anything the weak humans could throw at them. "These humans will learn what happens when you defy the will of the Zilani Empire," Zekthul announced to his commanders. "We will crush their pathetic fleet and then burn every human world until they beg for mercy." His fleet dropped out of hyperspace near the human colony world of New Austin. What they found waiting for them was beyond anything in their worst nightmares. The human fleet was not just larger than expected. It was impossibly large. Ships the size of small moons floated in perfect formation. Weapon systems that glowed with power unlike anything in galactic records. Defensive shields that made the space around them shimmer like water. But the most terrifying thing was how quiet they were. No radio chatter, no threats or demands. Just silent, deadly ships waiting with the patience of hunters. Captain Ryan Clark commanded the heavy cruiser Unbreakable. He was 42 years old with scars on his face from a mining accident in his youth. He had been in the merchant marine before joining the military, and he understood that sometimes the best way to avoid a fight was to show how badly you could hurt someone. "Open a channel to all Zilani frequencies," Clark ordered. "Channel open, sir." Clark's voice was broadcast to every ship in the Zilani fleet. His words were simple and clear. "This is Captain Clark of the Earth Defense Force. You have attacked and murdered human civilians. You have 30 seconds to surrender unconditionally, or we will demonstrate what humanity means by holding back. Choose wisely." Fleet Commander Zekthul's response was exactly what Clark expected. The Zilani had never surrendered to anyone in their entire history. They were too proud, too arrogant to believe they could lose. "Attack!" Zekthul screamed into his communicator. "Destroy these pathetic humans." The Zilani fleet opened fire with everything they had. Plasma beams and missile swarms filled the space between the two fleets. It was the most massive first strike in galactic military history. The human ships absorbed the attack without even slowing down. Their defensive screens turned the Zilani weapons into harmless light shows. Not one human vessel reported any damage at all. Then the humans fired back. What happened next lasted exactly 11 minutes and 14 seconds. When it was over, the mighty Zilani Third Fleet existed only as glowing clouds of metal vapor expanding through space. The human weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They did not just destroy ships, they unmade them at the atomic level. Zilani vessels that had survived dozens of battles simply ceased to exist. Not a single human ship had so much as a scratch on its hull. Captain Clark opened the communication channel again, this time broadcasting to the entire galaxy on all frequencies. "This is the Earth Defense Force," he said calmly. "Let the record show that we warned them. We tried diplomacy. We tried patience. We tried mercy. The Zilani chose war instead. This is the result. Across the galaxy, alien species watched the sensor recordings of the battle. Military commanders who had spent their careers studying warfare stared at their screens in complete silence. The humans had not just won, they had made it look easy. High Counselor Vexithera of the Zilani Empire received the news in her palace on the homeworld. She had been celebrating what she thought would be an easy victory over the weak humans. Instead, her military advisors were telling her something impossible. "The entire Third Fleet is gone?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "All of them." "Yes, High Counselor. 412 ships destroyed in 11 minutes. The humans suffered 0 casualties." Vexthara's 4 arms began shaking. The Third Fleet had been the pride of the Zilani military. It had conquered 17 systems and had never lost a single battle. "How many human ships attacked our fleet?" she asked. "Our records show 37 human vessels engaged in the battle. 37 ships had destroyed 412. The mathematics were clear, but Vexithara's mind could not accept them. On the planet Altair Prime, Ambassador Keth of the Altarian Republic watched the battle recordings with growing horror. His species had always been friends with humanity, but even he had not known the truth about human military power. "By the ancient stars," he whispered to his aide, "we never understood. When the humans said they were holding back, they meant it literally." His aide, a young female named Sekika, pointed at the screen. "Look at the human fleet formation, sir. They barely moved during the entire battle. It was like they were swatting insects." Keth nodded slowly. "Send a message to our home government immediately. Tell them to offer whatever assistance Earth requires, and make it clear that we are not doing this out of fear." "What should I say we are doing it out of, sir?" "Gratitude," Keth replied. "The humans could have conquered us all centuries ago. Instead, they chose to be our friends. We need to remember that." On Earth, President Mitchell watched the battle reports in the White House Situation Room. The screens showed the locations of human fleets throughout the galaxy. What had once been hidden defensive positions were now revealed as the largest military force in known space. Phase 1. "Complete, Madame President," General Hamilton reported. "All Zilani military forces in human space have been eliminated. Our casualties are 0. "And the Zilani response?" Mitchell asked. "They are requesting immediate ceasefire negotiations through the Altarian Republic." Mitchell's expression did not change. "Response? We told them that Earth no longer recognizes Galactic Council authority in this matter. The Zilani chose war after we warned them. They will face the consequences." General Hamilton looked at the tactical displays showing human fleet positions. Red dots marked Zilani worlds. Blue dots showed human forces moving toward them. "Madam President," he said quietly, "we are about to become the dominant power in this galaxy. That was never our intention." Mitchell nodded. "No, it was not. We wanted to be explorers and traders. We wanted to share art and music and stories with alien friends. But the Zilani decided that our desire for peace made us weak." She stood up and walked to the large window that looked out over the city of Washington. Somewhere out there, human families were going about their daily lives, not knowing that their species had just become the most feared force in the galaxy. "The age of holding back is over," she said. "We tried to be the good neighbors. We tried to solve problems with words instead of weapons, but some species only understand strength." General Hamilton joined her at the window. "The galaxy is going to be very different now." "Yes," Mitchell agreed. "And that is the Zilani's fault, not ours. We gave them every chance to choose peace. They chose war instead." The news of the Zilani fleet's destruction spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. Species that had ignored humanity for centuries suddenly found themselves watching Earth very carefully. The mathematics were simple and terrifying. If humans could destroy 400 ships with 37 of their own, what could they do with their full military power? Admiral Sarah Kim commanded the second human fleet as it moved through Zilani space like a storm made of metal and fire. Her orders were clear and simple. Remove all Zilani military capability, except only total surrender. Sarah was 51 years old, with short black hair and eyes that had seen too much war. She had been born on Mars back when it was still being terraformed. Her parents had died in a mining accident when she was 12. The military had become her family. Admiral, Colonel Mike Davis called from the tactical station. The Zilani are requesting ceasefire talks through the Altarian Republic. Sarah did not look up from the star charts on her command table. Red markers showed Zilani military bases across 17 star systems. Blue markers showed where human forces were moving to eliminate them. Response, she said coldly. Earth no longer recognizes Galactic Council authority in this matter. The Zilani chose war after we warned them. They will experience the full consequences of that choice. Colonel Davis was a young man who had never seen real combat before this war. He looked uncomfortable with the harshness of the Admiral's words. Ma'am, they're also saying they want to discuss terms for protecting civilian populations. Sarah finally looked up from her charts. Her expression was like stone. Their civilians will be protected because that is who we are. But their military will be completely destroyed because that is what they chose when they murdered our families. On the Zilani homeworld of Thexvar, Planetary Governor Yilnash watched human ships descend through the atmosphere like falling stars. But these were not invasion ships trying to conquer her world. They were mobile factories, turning raw materials into military equipment faster than her defensive forces could even understand what was happening. The humans had brought their entire industrial capacity to her world. Mining ships that could strip a mountain in hours. Factory ships that could build weapons and vehicles from basic elements. Construction ships that could turn empty ground into military bases overnight. Governor, her military aide whispered, our defense forces are reporting that the humans are not targeting civilian areas at all. They are only destroying military installations. Yilnash watched through her office window as a human factory ship landed in the middle of her planet's largest weapons manufacturing complex. Within minutes, the facility was being taken apart piece by piece. The humans were not just destroying it. They were studying it, learning from it, and using the materials to build their own equipment. They are not here to conquer us, she realized. They are here to make sure we can never threaten them again. Major Dan Foster led the 3rd Orbital Assault Division as they moved through the planet's industrial centers. His soldiers were professionals who had trained for years in urban warfare. But this was different from anything they had practiced. Remember your orders, Foster broadcast to his troops over their helmet radios. We are not here to hurt civilians. We are here to remove their ability to build weapons and warships. Anyone who surrenders will be treated according to the Geneva Conventions. Foster was 34 years old, a career soldier who had joined the military to see the galaxy. He had never expected to be leading ground forces in the first major war humanity had fought since leaving Earth. His troops moved through the Zilani weapons factories like ghosts. Their equipment was so advanced that Zilani security systems could not even detect them. Doors opened without being touched. Computer systems shut down without being hacked. It was like the human soldiers could control technology just by thinking about it. The Zilani military tried to fight back, but it was hopeless. Their weapons could not penetrate human armor. Their vehicles could not catch human aircraft. Their communication systems were jammed by devices they could not see or locate. Within 3 days, the Planetary Defense Force of Thexvar simply stopped fighting. They had run out of equipment, ammunition, and hope. Across the galaxy, other species watched the systematic destruction of Zilani military power with a mixture of horror and fascination. The humans were not being cruel or wasteful. They were being thorough. On the planet Rigel 4, High Counselor Murtala of the Rigel Confederacy called an emergency meeting of her government. The Confederacy had been neutral in the conflict, but neutrality was becoming impossible to maintain. The intelligence reports are clear, Murtala told her council. The humans have eliminated 70% of Zilani military capability in less than 2 weeks. At this rate, the Zilani Empire will cease to exist as a military power within a month. Her defense minister, a large male named Kextal, spoke up. Perhaps we should offer to mediate peace negotiations. With what authority? Murtala asked. The humans have withdrawn from the Galactic Council. They are operating under their own laws now. The truth was becoming clear to everyone. The Galactic Council had been a comfortable fiction that worked only as long as no one species was significantly more powerful than the others. Now that humanity had revealed its true strength, the old system was meaningless. On Earth, Lieutenant Colonel Nina Wells prepared her report for the Galactic Council. She was the military's top analyst, a woman who could look at numbers and see the future they predicted. Wells had been studying warfare for 20 years, but she had never seen anything like the efficiency of the human military machine. The logistics alone were incredible. Human forces were being supplied and reinforced across dozens of star systems simultaneously. "Begin transmission," she ordered her communication technician. The signal went out to every species in the galaxy. Council members, neutral governments, and military commands all received the same message. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Wells of Earth Defense Command," she began. "I am transmitting this message to clarify certain misconceptions about current human military operations." Wells looked directly into the camera. Her expression was calm and professional, but her words carried a weight that made alien leaders across the galaxy lean forward in their chairs. "What you have witnessed in the past 2 weeks represents approximately 8% of Earth's total military capacity. We have been restraining ourselves for over 200 years, hoping to coexist peacefully with our galactic neighbors. The Zilani chose to interpret our restraint as weakness. This was their fatal error." The transmission continued for 10 minutes. Wells explained human military doctrine, industrial capacity, and strategic capabilities in simple terms that any species could understand. When she finished, the galaxy understood that the war was not even close to being over. High Counselor Mertala watched the transmission with growing dread. If the devastating attacks they had witnessed represented only 8% of human capability, what would happen if Earth decided to use its full power? "What are you saying, human?" she asked the recording, even though Wells could not hear her on the screen. Wells seemed to anticipate the question. Her final words answered it perfectly. "I am saying that the war has not even started yet. What you have seen is humanity being careful not to hurt innocent people while we remove a military threat. If other species choose to interfere with this operation, you will see what we can do when we stop being careful." The message ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Morgan received reports from human fleets across Zilani space. The campaign was proceeding exactly as planned. Military installations were being eliminated with precision. Civilian casualties were being kept to an absolute minimum. "Admiral," his communication officer called out, "we're receiving surrender offers from 12 Zilani systems. They want to negotiate terms." Morgan looked at the tactical display showing the locations of human forces. Blue dots were spreading across what had once been Zilani territory like a slow-moving flood. "Terms are simple," he said. "Complete disarmament, full access for human inspection teams, reparations for the families killed in the attack on Kepler 442b. Any system that accepts these terms will be left alone. Any system that refuses will be completely pacified." "And if they ask what pacified means, sir?" Morgan's smile was not pleasant. "Tell them to ask the Third Fleet." "Oh wait, they cannot. The Third Fleet no longer exists. The Zilani Empire, which had terrorized 3 sectors of the galaxy for centuries, was collapsing like a house built from paper. But the most terrifying part was how easy the humans were making it look. Species across the galaxy began to understand a horrible truth. Humanity had not been weak. They had been merciful, and now that mercy was gone, used up on creatures who had mistaken kindness for weakness. The galaxy was learning what Earth had tried to teach them peacefully. Some warnings should never be ignored. 6 months after the first shots were fired, the galaxy looked completely different. The Zilani Empire was gone, existing only in history books and the nightmares of species who had watched it disappear. But the changes went much deeper than the simple destruction of one aggressive civilization. Fleet Admiral Jack Stone stood before the reformed Galactic Council in the same chamber where Ambassador Carter had delivered his warning. But everything had changed. The chamber itself was different now. Where once 7 species had shared power equally, Human representatives now sat at the head table with permanent authority over all major decisions. Stone was 62 years old, with white hair and calm blue eyes that had seen the rise and fall of empires. He wore the simple black uniform of Earth Defense Command, but everyone in the room knew he commanded the most powerful military force in galactic history. "The age of measured response is over," Stone announced to the assembly of alien delegates. His voice was not loud, but it carried clearly through the vast chamber. "Earth tried diplomacy for 2 centuries. We warned you repeatedly about the consequences of aggression against human interests. Those warnings were ignored." The alien delegates sat in uncomfortable silence. Many of them were the same individuals who had laughed at Ambassador Carter's warning 6 months ago. Now they listened to every word with the careful attention of students trying not to anger their teacher. Ambassador Helen Price stood beside Admiral Stone. She was a small woman with sharp green eyes who had spent her career in diplomatic service. She had watched the old system fail, and now she was here to explain the new one. "The Galactic Peace Accords are simple," Price announced, placing a data tablet on the podium. "Absolute protection for all human colonies and trade routes. Mandatory technology sharing for defensive purposes only. Human monitoring stations in every major star system. These are not negotiations. These are requirements." High Counselor Murtala, of the Rigel Confederacy, raised one of her furry hands. Her species had remained neutral during the war, but neutrality meant very little now. "Ambassador Price," she said carefully, "what you describe sounds like conquest." Price's expression did not change. "This is not conquest, High Counselor. This is the natural result of forcing humanity to abandon restraint. We did not want to rule you, but you have made it necessary." The truth was simple and terrible. For 2 centuries, humanity had been content to be just another member of the galactic community. They had shared their music and art. They had traded fairly. They had helped other species during disasters and wars. But when the Zilani had attacked human families, they had forced Earth to reveal its true nature. And that nature was the most dangerous thing the galaxy had ever encountered. On Earth, the transformation was equally dramatic. Cities that had focused on research and peaceful development now hummed with military production. The hidden infrastructure that had taken centuries to build was finally operating at full capacity. Dr. Laura Martinez stood in the control room of the Titan research facility, watching as her teams prepared technologies that would ensure human dominance for thousands of years to come. She was a small woman with gray hair who had spent her life creating things that had never been used in anger. "Project categories 7 through 15 are now active," she reported to the Joint Chiefs through secure communication. "Estimated time to full deployment, 18 months. The projects Dr. Martinez was discussing had names like stellar engineering and planetary reformation. They were technologies that could move stars and reshape entire worlds. The galaxy had seen only the smallest hint of what humanity could really do. General Hamilton, now serving as Earth's supreme military commander, reviewed the reports with satisfaction mixed with sadness. He had spent his career preparing for this day, but he had hoped it would never come. "The Zilani thought they were fighting humans as we appeared to be," he said to his staff. "They had no idea they were fighting humans as we chose to appear. There is a very important difference." Across the galaxy, former enemies were discovering that difference in ways that changed everything they thought they knew about warfare and civilization. Captain Brad Cooper commanded the massive space station that now orbited the former Zilani homeworld. The station was the size of a small moon, equipped with weapons that could destroy fleets and factories that could build new ones from asteroid material. Every day, Cooper received reports of species voluntarily requesting human protection. The irony was not lost on him. By forcing humanity to show its true military power, the Zilani had accidentally created the very thing they had feared most: human dominance over the galaxy. "Sir," his communication officer called out, "the Karathi Republic is requesting a defense agreement. They want human ships to protect their trade routes from pirates." Cooper looked at the tactical display showing human fleet positions throughout the galaxy. Blue dots marked human forces, and there were a lot of them. more than any other species, had imagined possible. Approved, Cooper said. Send the Third Fleet to establish patrol routes through Karathi space. The Karathi had been one of the species that voted to censure Earth at the original council meeting. Now they were begging for human protection, and humanity was providing it without complaint or punishment. On the planet Altair Prime, Ambassador Keth met with his government's leaders to discuss the new galactic reality. His species had been humanity's friends from the beginning, and now that friendship was more valuable than all the trade agreements in the galaxy. The humans could have conquered us all centuries ago, Keth explained to the Altarian Senate. Instead, they chose to be our neighbors and friends. We must never forget that choice, especially now that we understand what it cost them. His aide, Sekaka, looked at the reports coming in from across the galaxy. Human fleets were everywhere, but they were not conquering or enslaving anyone. They were simply making sure that no other species would ever again mistake human mercy for human weakness. What do we do now, Ambassador? She asked. We do what we have always done, Keth replied. We remain friends with humanity, and we remember that friendship is not about power or fear. It is about choosing to trust someone even when they could hurt you. Meanwhile, in the deepest parts of space, human exploration ships were discovering things that made even their advanced technology seem primitive. Ancient ruins that spoke of civilizations millions of years old. Artifacts that suggested the galaxy had seen cycles of rise and fall that stretched back to the beginning of time itself. Dr. Emily Clark led one of these exploration teams aboard the research vessel Discovery. She was an archaeologist who had spent her career studying human history, but now she was uncovering secrets that put Earth's story into a much larger context. We are not the first species to face this choice, she reported to Earth Command. The ruins suggest that every few million years, one species becomes dominant enough to either unite the galaxy or destroy it. Previous species chose destruction. We have chosen unity. The evidence was everywhere once you knew how to look for it. Worlds that had been burned from orbit. Star systems where planets had been moved or destroyed. The galaxy was full of scars from ancient wars that had raged between species that no longer existed. Humanity had broken the cycle. Instead of using their overwhelming power to punish their enemies, they had used it to create a system where war itself became impossible. President Mitchell, now in her second term, addressed the citizens of Earth from the Oval Office. Behind her, the windows showed the lights of Washington, D.C., but she knew that similar lights were shining on human worlds throughout the galaxy. We did not choose this responsibility, she said to the cameras. For 2 centuries, we tried to be just another member of the galactic community. We wanted to explore and learn and share what we discovered with our neighbors. She paused, looking directly into the camera. But when other species mistook our desire for peace as a sign of weakness, they forced us to reveal who we really are. We are the children of Earth, the survivors of every disaster our world could create. We learned long ago that the strong have a duty to protect the weak, even when the weak do not appreciate that protection. The broadcast went out to every human world and station, but it was also transmitted to alien governments throughout the galaxy. It was not a threat or a boast. It was simply a statement of fact. The galaxy now lived under what historians would later call the Terran Peace, not because humanity had conquered anyone, but because humanity had made conquest itself obsolete. Any species that chose aggression would face the full might of human military power. Any species that chose cooperation would find humanity to be the most generous and helpful ally imaginable. In the end, the Zilani had taught the galaxy the most important lesson in its history. When humans say they are holding back, wise species listen. The price of not listening was the loss of everything they thought they knew about power and civilization. The war was over, but the peace that followed would last for millennia. Not because it was enforced by fear, but because it was built on the simple recognition that some species are meant to lead and others are meant to follow. Humanity had tried to avoid that leadership for 2 centuries,